So back to what I was saying. Could be us. This could be us. So back to what I was saying. Could be us. This could be us. So back to what I was saying. Could be us. This could be.
What's going on, everybody out there? This is going to be a openings that you should play under 1600 course. If you're under 1600, this should cover you all the way until you get to the 1600 rating. And these openings are based off of development. Very fun. You get to attack, win pieces, early checkmates, going for a first round knockout in a lot of these lines that I'm going to show you. This is for all the Implodians. Of course, shout out the Implodians, the Roper School, Avondale, Daycroft, everybody out there. This is for you. We're going to look at just a simple E4 and E5. And we're going to start out with an aggressive opening to play against E4, E5. And this opening is called the Scotch Gambit here. And this is course number 1. So let's pull up a board. And this opening is very dear to my heart. This is the first opening that I taught my 3-year-old son, Bryan Wilson Jr., and he went on to win the K-3 championship using this opening, and the K-5 state championship later on using the same opening. Also, he was able to be the first board on 9 straight state championship school teams using these openings that I'm going to be showing you guys, and especially the Scotch Gambit. All right, let's get to it. First things, it starts with E4 and E5. You only can play the Scotch Gambit when you see these moves: Knight F3 and Knight C6 to defend the E5 pawn. And then instead of playing moves like Bishop C4 or Bishop B5, here we play D4. The number one move is to take the pawn. You're going to see that 90% of the time. Sometimes you might see D6 or F6. These moves are kind of playing it safe, but we're just looking at when they take, which they usually do, take on D4. And here we do not take back, hence the gambit. A gambit is an opening where you give up a pawn for free for development and some other imbalances in your favor. Now, if your opponent keeps the pawn, they're usually going to lose. That's the key to the Scotch Gambit. Most kids are greedy. They want to keep the pawn. But in this opening, if you keep the pawn, it's not good. So we play Bishop C4. And notice we still have 2 attackers on the pawn. And we will take the pawn if our opponent chooses just to give it back. But remember, kids are greedy. So there's a couple ways that they can try to give it back. Or actually, there's one. They could just play D6 here. And this is actually a smart move for someone playing against the Scotch Gambit. And we're going to see this position multiple times. But this position is also almost winning for white based off of the great control over the center for the pieces. The D6 pawn blocks the bishop on F8. Look at our bishop on C1 and our bishop on C4. They have really good diagonals here, and not the same for the bishop on F8. So that's why D6 isn't considered the best move. But if you just want to dodge all the traps and the zaps of the Scotch Gambit, you're going to see a lot of black players play D6. So we just take the pawn back. They didn't defend it. We take it back now. And after Knight F6, 6, attacking e4. We just develop the knight to c3. Bishop e7, get castle, pull our rook behind our pawn. That gives us more space than our opponent. He's going to put his rook on the half open file. h3. Reason why we're doing this is because notice the bishop can't go to g4 attacking our queen, can't go to f5, and can't go to e6 because we have 2 pieces attacking that square. So the only good square for the bishop is d7, so that's why we play h3. Bishop d7, bishop f4, developing our last minor piece. Now look at all of our minor pieces are controlling the center of the board. Okay. And bishop f8. The reason for this is to uncover an attack on the e4 pawn. Of course, we have 2 defenders, but I think later he's going to play bishop to bishop to g7 and get the bishop to a better diagonal, because right now the bishop is just poor on f8. And we play a4. Why? So that when our bishop is attacked, because we have a bishop on this really good diagonal, we can just drop it back into the hole and still aim at f7. So this is a default look of the Scotch Gambit when black does not want to keep the pawn, gives the pawn back. We still have a much better game, so get used to this position when your opponent gives you the pawn back. Now let's look at the juicy stuff. What happens if they keep the pawn? So there's a couple ways to keep the pawn. One of the worst ways, and we'll go over this, bishop let's go bishop c5. All right, now bishop c5 is one way to keep the pawn here. And I named this the BJ variation because this is a line that was shown to me by my son. Before, I would just tell him that he should play c3. But one day he played this move, bishop to c5. And I remember him telling me, I was like, Brian, why didn't you play c3? I told you c3. And he said, Daddy, I think this is better. And even though I wouldn't consider it better, it's definitely not worse. They're about the same. But the way my son has played his line is more forcing. Okay, so when you see bishop c5 here, you're going to attack the f7 pawn with knight g5. And no matter what your opponent protects f7 with, we're going to take here. So the worst way black can defend f7 is knight e5. So after knight e5, we have knight takes f7, knight takes, king, bishop takes, king takes, and then we get our piece back with the fork. After g6, we just go queen to d5. Why? Because we want to make the king go to a worse square, king to g7, and then boom. We take the pawn, and we're going to win this pawn. Because the only way for black to defend this pawn is queen f6, but black queen no longer covers c7, so we're winning here. All right, let's look at the best way for black to defend the pawn, and even that way isn't that great. Knight h6. We go knight takes f7, knight takes, bishop takes, and then queen check, another fork here. But here we don't have to stop on d5. We can just take right away on c5. Our opponent can play d6. And what we want to do is protect our e4 pawn with our queen. So we go queen c4, bishop e6, and then queen e2. And this is our position. White has better space. And you're going to see me say this a lot in these openings that I'm going to show you. The openings give you a better endgame, an endgame that you can easily play and win. And when you see an endgame where one person has double pawns, now double pawns are not bad when it's the middle game, where there's many pieces on the board. But when pieces come off the board, the double pawns tend to get in each other's way. For instance, the pawn on d6 cannot go past the pawn on d4. So as pieces get traded off, these pawns are going to be worse for black and better for white. Look at white's pawns. They're all even. Nothing is doubled. Nothing's in the way. So here, after queen e2, rook e8, putting the rook on the same file here, we just castle d5 and f3. king to g8. He kind of manually castles here. There's bishop f4, takes and takes here. And what we're doing here now, there is an isolated pawn, even though it's a pass pawn. We want to keep the queens on the board because the queen and the bishop combination are really good at attacking the king. Queen to d2, attacking the bishop here. c5, c5 protects the knight. The knight was being attacked. Knight to a3. Why? We want to go knight to b4, maybe knight to d6. Look at the dark squares the bishop controls. Black stops that. Bishop to e5 because we want to go queen h6 and then mate. c5. Bishop to f6 attacks the queen here. We want to go queen h6. That's why queen d7 controls g7. And this is pretty much it of the BJ variation when white or black tries to keep his extra pawn with the move bishop to c5. Boom. All right. Now let's look at another way that white tries or black tries to keep the pawn is knight f6. And the reason for this is if we take our pawn back, then black just takes the pawn back too. Okay. But here we have a lot of tricks here. I will say that the move, if you were over 1600, the main move would be e5. For those of you who are over 1600, I'll give you that line in a special video. But the ones that are under 1600, I suggest you play castle, which has way more landmines for your opponent to step on. And one of them has to deal with the move knight takes e4. And the reason why your opponents, your under 1600 opponents, don't want to play knight takes e4 is that we can easily pin the knight to the king. Even though knight takes e4 is actually the best move for black, there are some tricks to it. So before we go there, let's look at what happens when they're scared to take this pawn and pin their own knight. Let's look what happens, what they would do other than that. Bishop to c5 is an option. Of course, another option is d6, but d6 is going to look just like the default variation I talked about in one of the first videos. So white is much better there. But let's look at bishop c5. All right, so bishop c5 is not the same as the BJ variation because black can castle right away. So it's not the same. And here we want to play e5 here. Now our opponent could move the knight here. So let's say they did go knight to g4 here. And here, we have a lot of moves here. We can play, one of the best moves, I think, is playing bishop takes f7, king takes f7. And even though we sacrifice a bishop for one pawn, we get the piece right back because we uncover an attack on the knight on g4 with a discovery and a check. Queen can't take knight because the bishop protects the knight. And then once the king goes to g8, then boom, here you go. Queen takes g4. Right? And after d5, we have move like queen f4, which threatens checkmate. So this is a line that's good for us. All right. So knight f6 isn't the best move here. Oops. Hold on. After the move e5. That only leaves the move d5 here. Now, d5 is attacking the bishop. Of course, we could take en passant, but we won't be getting much there. But what we want to do is take the knight. So e takes f6. He takes our bishop, but we get to do additional take on g7 attacking the rook. That rook is too valuable, so you must move the rook. And then bishop g5 here, attacking the queen. Now, the queen has different squares to move to. Let's look at one of the top options here, and that is f6. So after f6, that blocks the attack on the queen. Here we go rook e1 check. Must get out of check first. King to f7, and then bishop h6. And then the best move here for black is to play rook to e2, and then we go knight b to d2. Why? Because we're attacking the c4 pawn. We're developing all our pieces. Look at that king. That king is just ready to be attacked eventually, but first we have to make sure we develop our pieces, threatening a pawn here. Also, we're threatening knight e4 in some situations because of the bishop here as well. So there you have it. But here's a question here. What if our opponent tries to go queen g6, attacking our bishop with the king? Here we go queen c1, and after queen d5, the reason for this is so the queen could come here and double attack the bishop. Here instead we go knight h4 check. Knight h4 check. And if king h5 attacking the bishop here, knight here, we don't care. We don't care at all. He can just, we play f3. Look at the threat of check here. If he takes here, then we have queen f4 check, king h5, and then queen takes f6. The big threat is g4 check. Ouch. So after d3, this is a check by the bishop. We have to get out of check. King f1, and this is already lost. g4 is hard to stop. If bishop h3, where you're trying to stop us from playing g4, we'll play rook to e4. What's the threat? Rook h4 checkmate. Woo. So that's not a good idea for black's king to come out to g6. No, no, no. All right, so that means rook e8 is the best, knight d2. Let's say bishop f5 here. And you know, black still wants to get the queen over here to take this bishop, because as long as that bishop is here, this pawn is very dangerous on g7. Knight takes c4, queen to d7, h3, stopping any pins on the g file. King goes back to g8. Here comes the knight here. Why? Because we know the queen wants to go to h5, so we want to go knight f1 and knight g3, attacking the bishop and covering h5. So our bishop on h6 is safe. Look at the queen going to d5, knight to f1. The bishop moves out of the way, so he can play queen h5 and possibly win the bishop. But here we go, knight to g3. Attacking the bishop here, putting pressure here, but also covering h5. This is winning for white. All right. So that line is the bishop, is the f6 line. When we play bishop g5, when our opponent tries to keep the pawn with knight f6. So instead of f6, what if they play something like knight e7? This is also not so good. First of all, the knight is pinned to the queen. We developed our knight attacking c4 and even going to e4 maybe. Coach, what if they play b5, coach? I can hear the kids say. After b5, what we'll play is knight to e4. Not only are we threatening the bishop, we're threatening checkmate with knight to f6. The king can't go to f8 and the king can't go to d7 because the knight will be on f6. So that will be a checkmate. So the only thing black can do is go rook takes g7, and then we just take a free bishop. So b5, protecting the c4 pawn is not possible. So queen d5 was played here. Now rook to e1. Look at the pressure we're putting on the piece here. Bishop to g4. Knight goes to e4. The threat is to go knight takes c5, and then bishop takes e7. He does castle. We take knight on c5. Bishop takes on f3. We trade off a lot of pieces. And rook, we defend this bishop here because it was pinned to the king. And if you attack the pinned piece, now the pawn no longer covers e6. Knight to e6 forks both works. So that doesn't work out either. All right. So knight e7. is that line. Now let's look at, hey, what if we just move the queen out of the way? Let's go queen to d6. All right, so after queen d6, of course, we add a check. Bishop to e6, knight to d2, threatening knight takes e4 because the bishop is pinned, guys. And remember, the castle, the queen, he can't queenside castle because you cannot castle through check. So the king is stuck in the center. He goes queen to d5 so he can protect c4. But instead, we go knight to e4. Not only are we attacking bishop, but the biggest thing is knight to f6, forking the queen, rook, and king. They call that a royal fork. He had to stop it somehow. And here, instead of taking the bishop, we just put the bishop on f6. Not only does it protect g7, if bishop takes, we have another royal fork. So queen goes to d7. Knight takes d4. We get our pawn back. The bishop and the queen cover d4. He castles, so he has a rook, a rook, queen, and a knight attacking d4. We just take on c6. By the way, if he takes on d1, you're wondering, we don't take the queen back right away. We just take here with check first. King has to move, and then we take the queen back. So that's the difference. He goes queen takes c6. Now the rook is attacking the queen here. Queen to f3. We protect the bishop on f6. Take here. Queen takes, so we keep the pawn on g7 protected. And we are completely winning. We're up by a pawn. But also, look at the in-game position as well for our opponent. We see double pawns here. We see an isolated pawn. So it's all about groups, pawn groups. And this, he has one group here because they're a group of pawns that can connect. This is two groups because it's only by itself. And this is a three group. So whoever has the most pawn groups has the worst in-game. So black has 3 and white has 2 because we have this group. It's possible that this pawn can be connected, and then these pawns are all in order and connected as well. So that means queen d6, avoiding the capture, is not good either. Queen d6. Now let's put the queen on d5 here. Here we have the fantastic rook e1 check. Bishop e6 blocks that, and then knight c3. Yes, it looks like the knight is hanging, but bam! We take the queen because the bishop is pinned. We up a free queen. We trade. Win queen and king in game. Game over. So here, after knight c3, queen goes to f5. Then, boom, knight to e4. Remember, the bishop is stopping queenside castling, and this pawn, the rook has already moved, so there's no castling here. And we are threatening knight to f6, forking the king and the rook. And not only that, if that's allowed, the king will be on the same diagonal as the bishop. So that means we can get the rook for free. So black can't allow this, so he plays rook to f6. And a shocking move is coming. Knight to h4. The queen is trapped, guys. For instance, it looks like d5 is safe, but what about the fork here? All right. Now, what if he plays, let's say, queen g4? Another fork. What if he plays queen to e5? This is not a fork, but it's a discovery on the queen. Of course, if the queen takes the knight, then bishop takes queen. So the only good move for white here, or black, I'm sorry, is to play rook takes rook takes g5. We take the queen, and it looks like black has some pieces for the queen, but we continue with our initiative, attacking a piece of greater value. There's rook e5. We attack a piece of greater value again, and notice the rook has nowhere to go. Wow. So he has to take a knight, and then rook takes. And here we have a queen, 2 rooks, and 6 pawns, which totals 21 points. And our opponent has a rook, 3 pieces, and 7 pawns. So the rook is worth 5. Every one of these knights and bishops are worth 3. So that's 14. And then 7 pawns, 14 plus 7. That is 21. So it seems like this is pretty even here. But it is not. It is not even because the king is in the center. And so we're already threatening to play the move f5. And that will win the bishop. And the bishop doesn't have many places to go, by the way, after f5. And let's say like it's black's turn and we play here. And let's say castle here. Then we could just take this here and then take, and let's say take, and then queen to, let's say f3. And look at those weak pawns now. So even though our opponent has 2 pieces here, and I think I did miscount, guys. So white is definitely completely winning by material. But these pawns are so weak because they're not connected to other pawns. So we're going to be able to win a lot of those pawns for sure. All right. Okay. Let's go back here. So that means in the Scotch Gambit, where our opponent tries to keep his pawn with knight f6 by attacking our pawn, letting us have this pawn, but taking our pawn. It doesn't work if he tries to go bishop c5 after castle. Now let's see what happens if knight takes e4 instead of bishop c5. Here we go rook e1. That pins the knight to the king. And after d5, we go bishop takes d5. I know. It looks like we gave up a bishop for a pawn. But we get it right back with knight to c3. Again, if taken, then the queen is hanging. So we have 2 pieces attacking here, and the queen has many options here. Let's say the queen goes to, d7 here. All right, so here in this situation, we would just take rook check. Why? Because here our rook can put pressure on d4. After bishop e7, we go knight takes d4. And the only way black can avoid losing a losing position is playing f5. We play rook f4. After castle, knight takes c6. Take here. And then knight to d5, threatening the fork here. Okay. Bishop to d6. We play c4 because we don't care if bishop takes c5 because we have a fork. So we don't care about that right now. So that's why the best move is for black to take away the knight. But at that point, we go rook h4. We're threatening queen h5, attacking h7. And this position is pretty much equal here. So we are perfectly fine here. If our opponent can find their way through the landmines right here, they will have a fighting chance, but I would prefer to be white. All right. So let's go back here. Now, what if it wasn't queen d7 after we play knight c3? What if they played something like queen to d8 instead of queen d7? Well, that's even worse. The reason why is with the queen on d7, he was able to take back the knight with the queen and not have those pawn islands or those pawn groups. Okay, let's see how this one goes. Rook takes, take on d4, f5 is play, rook f4, and then we go knight takes c6, queen takes, knight takes, and then pawn takes e6, and look at the groups. 3 groups for black, 2 groups for white. You're going to look at these different pawns, and you're going to start to target them. Already, it's time to do it now. Rook to a4. That pawn will be targeted. That stops the bishop from coming to a really nice diagonal. And the rook can't go to an open file because we'll take the free pawn. And this is a position that's better for white because of those pawn groups. All right. So let's see, instead of queen to d8, let's say they go to better squares, like let's say queen to h5 here. Here, we'll take the knight with the knight instead of the rook here. Why? Because now bishop to e6 is played. We'll play bishop to g5. That stops black from castling queenside. Now let's say he plays f6. Well, that's not good. We'll just play knight takes f6 here. And after pawn takes, rook takes e6 check. King e7, and then bishop takes e7. Look at what we're doing. We're attacking the rook here. Queen to, if queen goes to, let's say f5 attacking our rook, we'll just go knight takes d4, protecting the rook and attacking the queen. And let's say they do something like rook g8, saving their queen. We just go queen e7, putting more pressure on e7. And then after take, we completely have an extra piece here. And look at how we are defending that extra piece with everything we have. So that is winning for white. All right. Let's say here they don't play f6. They play probably a better move, something like h6 here. Well, if they play h6, we just go bishop f6. We still keep our opponent from castling queenside, but if the bishop is captured, knight takes f6, and again a fork. So let's say, all right, so the queen says, all right, I get out of the forking square, but then we hit the queen again, knight h4. He can't go to h5 because we'll take. Can't go to g5 because he'll take. Can't go to f5 because we'll take. He can go to g4. Let's say queen g4. I think we can just move out of the way because the queen is in such a bad position. Of course, if take here, there's another fork again. All right. So here, h7 and the queen. This is a terrible looking square. And here we just play queen to d3. We're going to put a lot of pressure on d4. Take that when we want to take it. White is better here. Don't have to even move any of the pieces. For instance, if this pawn moves forward, then we just take the rook. No problem. g5, take the rook. He takes here. Another fork! So he can't do that. It's winning for white. All right. So let's say h6 is not the move here. Let's go with bishop d6 here. So after bishop d6, we take that bishop. That's a nice bishop there. And what we want to do is just keep pressure on these pawns because these are pawn islands. So now we're starting to attack those pawns. c3. If take here, we win a free queen. Why? The bishop is pinned to the king. Bishop can't capture or move here. All right. So rook c8 is a good move for black. Here we play a3. Why? We didn't want to allow knight b4 after we take. And here we have just a really good playable position. You just play chess here. Black is okay here if black can get to this point, which I'm guaranteeing you guys under 1600 players cannot. All of these variations I'm showing you that are going more than 10 moves, I've never seen anyone in my life that is 1600 rated and under make it here. They usually step on a landmine, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 landmines before they even get back to the base. Okay, so just showing you the best case scenario for your opponent, but more than likely you won't see it. Okay, if you just make sure you stay good at your tactics, use your development advantage, you're gonna find winning ideas on your own. They don't have to match the ones that I'm putting on the video, but you will find those on your own. I'm guaranteeing it. All right. So, this line with queen h5, we're done with that one. So what if the queen after knight c3, what if the queen goes to a5 here? All right. So here we take on e4 again. Look at the discovery check we have. So they block with the bishop, and then we go knight to g5 here. Not bishop g5 because it's a completely different position. Now he's probably going to have to give us our pawn back. Castle, we take, rook takes, bishop d6, bishop to g5 attacking the rook, rook to e8, queen e2. And after king to d7, just let you know, guys, it's possible that this could happen too. King b8, but here we just go bishop d2, attacking a piece of greater value, queen to b5, and here we just go rook e1. For instance, if our opponent is stupid enough, let me not say stupid, silly enough to take on b2, then we have a queen sacrifice for checkmate. Bow, made in the face. Okay. All right, so this position is really, really good for white. Again, I don't think you will get here because of all the landmines, but the main move here is for black to play king to d7, though, and that's two attackers on the rook on e6. So what we do take that, and then here we go queen to d3, threatening queen takes h7. Now let me say the move is h6, so the h7 pawn will be defended, but I'm just going to let you guys know this is not a big threat for black here, because of course we have a knight and a rook that covers that. Okay, so after h6 we go bishop d2, moving the bishop away from the h6 threat, and then we're attacking the queen. Queen moves to h5, rook goes to e1, take, and then bishop takes. And our whole plan again is to take here, but you got to watch it because there's a checkmate threat here. So we might have to play h3 at the right time. But you got to watch it. You got to watch it here. Maybe even I don't know. Black can play queen to d5. That's a threat of a pawn here, but you shouldn't have to worry about this at all. All right. So, in the line where black takes on e4, that is completely good for you as white. All right. So, that means that covers all of the lines that black tries to keep the pawn. Oh, nope, we got one more. One more line where black tries to keep the pawn, and it is bishop to b4 check. All right, and here we just attack the bishop with the c pawn. They should take. We take back with b takes c3, and now he has an option. The best option is to play bishop a5, but let's see the other options. For instance, bishop e7. Anytime there's a piece on e7, f7 is usually a target. So here we just threaten checkmate. And the only way to stop checkmate is knight e5, where we just take the free knight with our knight, or knight h6, where we just take the knight with our bishop. And now the only way to stop checkmate is to castle, and here we're up a whole piece. Scotch Gambit worked in this situation, giving us a piece. And we just trade pieces, go to the end game, up a piece, bunch of pawns, win some pawns, get a queen, win the game. All right. So bishop e7 isn't a good retreat. Let's say bishop c5. Well, if bishop c5, the strange thing is this bishop is not protected here, so we could actually go bishop takes f7, getting our pawn back. King takes f7, losing a piece. Queen d5, attacking the king. King f8, queen takes e5, getting our piece back. But the one thing about this is the king can't castle. King is already moved. When the king is in the center, now we can just aim our attack at that king. Moves like bishop a3, castle, rook e1, e5. All these ways to open up the position to attack that uncastled king. We're winning. All right. So that means the best development is bishop a5. let me go over one thing that I didn't expect to go over here. If the move bishop to d6 here, I think we should just castle, because the problem is the knight can't develop well. Okay, so for instance, if knight to g5, we just play e5, and if knight takes, we take, and bishop takes e5, and then we play rook e1, because the black king is not castled, so it's pinned. Even if d6, f4, we're gonna win the piece. So even bishop d6 isn't good at all. All right. So let's look at bishop a5. So after bishop a5, there's no piece on e7, so we don't have to target f7. So here we just castle, because the problem is our opponent has a problem developing. If he plays knight f6, we just attack the knight with e5. And if knight to g4, here we can go bishop g5 here. And notice the queen has nowhere to go, so the only thing he could do is play f6 or d6. Okay, or or knight e7. Let's look at f6 here. If f6, we take, and he takes, and then we just go rook check, and the king can't castle. Very, very simple there. So f6 is not that great. Let's look at knight e7. Knight e7, h3. Now this knight has to go to the rim, and then we play rook to e1. Rook to e1. Now, if our opponent castles, we go bishop d3. Why? Because the h7 pawn is unprotected, and a simple queen c2 you can't protect it. For instance, after b6, queen c2, you can't protect this here, because if knight g6, which blocks the queen and bishop battery on h7, wait, what about your queen? What about your queen? So knight can't do anything. And if you play g6, which also blocks the access to h7, wait a minute, what about your knight? What about your knight? All right, so no matter what, that pawn will be ours. The king's gonna be without one of the key defenders around the king, which are those pawns, and we should be able to win that game, especially since we're up a pawn. So that's not good. So let's say our opponent, instead of knight f6, let's say they develop to e7. Well, we got knight to g5 here. And even if our opponent decides to, because look what's happening here. We're attacking f7. And let's say our opponent castles. Well, we attack f7 a third time. But we also are attacking h7 2 times. And this is checkmate, guys. That's mate in the face. So they must stop checkmate, h6, and then we go knight takes f7, where they have to take the knight, guys. They have to take the knight. And since they have to take the knight, we're just going to go bishop takes f6. And also they have to play king h7, because if they play king h8, then we just go, bow, sacrifice here. Because pawn takes, queen takes is checkmate. So these are vicious attacks by the Scotch Gambit here. So, but coach, why do we have to take this knight? Let's say because the knight is attacking your queen. But coach, can't the queen just move? Queen to e8. Okay, and then we go double check. Bishop and the knight. So the king is forced to move. Double check. Knight and queen. So the king is forced to move. Queen h8. Mate in the face. This, so many Implodians over the years have done this to higher rated players. You know, so many good memories of the Scotch Gambit, where just looking at someone that is 400, 500 points higher than you, look at their board like, what happened to me? This is the effect of the Scotch Gambit. Oh my goodness. So that's why the knight has to be taken. All right, so here that means there is no knight f6, no knight e7. The only thing black can do is just play d6. That's it. And after d6 we go queen b3. Why? We put in pressure on f7, threatening f7. That's a check. And he could play queen f6. We play rook e1. Why? We want to push this open. Black is 2 moves away from casting to either side. Knight e7, push. queen to g6. He's threatening this move here, but we take on d6, attacking the knight. Because if bishop h3, we can always play knight h4, guys. Let me just show you that. So bishop h3 looks like it's a checkmate threat, but we can go knight h4, protects the checkmate square, and attacks the queen at the same time. So that's possible for us. So after takes d6, take d6, and then there's bishop g5. Bishop g5 is also a good move as well, saying to black, hey, if you castle, okay, take, and take. Thank you. Come again. So here, bishop g5, bishop to e7, trying his best to defend e7, take, and then bishop to d5. Right. If you castle, the only defender of the bishop is the knight. I'll take it, you take, and thank you. Come again. So here, he has to find another move. So queen f6 protects the bishop, but now knight e4 is coming. Castle, rook to b1, making sure this bishop can't develop because we'll take b7. Knight to e5, take, and then knight e4. Look at the pieces in the center of the board, guys. Look at this. Look at this here. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. Queen to a4 here. Basically saying, hey, there's no bishop d7. I'll take it. Rook to d8. Takes on b7. Rook takes. Hits the unprotected bishop. Rook to b5. What is it attacking? The e5 pawn. And so this is the best case scenario for your opponent with black against that line. But it does not work. Does not work. All right. So there's also a possibility instead of queen f6, which protects f7 twice because of the double attack, there's queen e7. And if queen e7, we just play e5. Does give up a free pawn. After take, we just go knight d2. Because, guys, remember, if he takes here, we have this rook e1 move that pins. He has to watch out. So knight takes e4. We can't do it right now because he has bishop e6. But we take back. Look at the bishop we're attacking. And we're also threatening rook e1. Wow. So after bishop b6, rook e1, bishop e6, and then the move knight to g5, putting pressure here. Queenside castle, knight takes e6, and you notice that he didn't take this back. He didn't have to, because let's say after knight f6, let's say we play something silly like knight takes. Whoops, we just got back rank checkmated. So we're going to need to develop our bishop at some point. Knight takes b6. Why? Because that bishop was on a really nice diagonal. Bishop to g5 now. Now you have to take this. Take, and then we go rook takes e6. And look at the pawn islands. 1, 2, 3. And white, we have pawn islands too. And actually right now, we're actually down a pawn. But whose king is safer? Look at our king. Nice and neat. Look at that king. Right? That's not that great. So the white is better based off of the king that's really, really not safe. Plus, I don't even know where this queen would be going. There's also pressure here. So let's say queen goes here maybe. And we have maybe rook e1 to e8. So it's just a lot of pressure here. Lots of pressure here. Even moves like bishop to f4. Right? Like, let's say queen c4. Oops. Queen c4 check, king here, and then bishop here. Boom. These are possibilities. All right. So that means queen e7 isn't that good here. But what is good? That's a good question. There is some lines that are really good, but for instance, your opponents don't know them. If you're under 1600, your opponents don't know what those lines are. So this is a fun opening, gives you a lot of chances to win early games, a lot of chances to win material, it's just very, very fun. Very aggressive. It's important to have fun when you're playing a game of chess. I love doing these videos for you guys, especially the Scotch Gambit, which has helped me to through coaching. This opening helped me win multiple state team championships, especially my first team ever, which is Detroit, Spain elementary, winning the state championship with everyone playing the Scotch Gambit, and also so many individual players, from my son Bryan Jr. to Aiden Song, top player from Roper. Scotch Gambit is very dear to my heart. So this is going to conclude our course of the Scotch Gambit. I want you guys to get out there and play it in your tournaments. Make sure you go back and reference these videos in case you forget something. Reference these videos as much as you can, and just have fun with it. We're going to be coming soon with, because everyone's not going to play E5 when you play E4, so what if the Sicilian happens? Well, I'm doing a video on the Smith-Morr Gambit. What if the French happens? There's no good gambit for the French, but we have a really good way to play the French, very easy. We'll have a video on that. The Scandinavian as well, E4, D5. We have a gambit for the Scandinavian as well. And the Carol Khan also have a really good opening for the Carol Khan. Everything is going to be based off of development and being aggressive and having an attacking game. And so that's what we're going to do in the next upcoming videos. Thank you for joining me. I had fun doing this video on the Scotch Gambit. Enjoy the opening, and make sure you put the mate in their face. Peace.
This could be us. So back to what I was saying. Could be us. This could be us.